Hey there, what's going on everybody? Hope you're having a good day. Today we're going to be taking a look at the family adventure film, Duma. Spoilers ahead. We open on a series of long, steady shots of the African landscape and its inhabitants in their natural environment in South Africa. Monkeys, cheetahs, lions, and various birds. It's a serene, peaceful landscape that feels untouched by human hands. That night, a baby cheetah goes for a late stroll by itself, clearly lost. It stops at a fence but manages to push through the wide opening, and then stumbles through to the other side. This sees the wild animal on a road, with a pair of headlights approaching it. It looks like the car might run it down, only for it to swerve off the road just in time. Whew. The driver of the car is Peter, a local farmer, who's on his way home with his son, Zan. Both father and son are equally surprised to find a wild baby cheetah in this part of the country, but they quickly trap and rescue it from an oncoming truck that nearly runs them and the cheetah over. Well, that clearly indicates how long the cheetah would have survived on its own. They take the cheetah home, showing Zan's mother, Kristen, the wild cub. They aren't so much concerned with having a wild animal in their house, but more for the safety of the lost cub. So that night, the cub sleeps in Zan's bed, and we see a connection grow between the two. As expected, the family decided to keep and raise the cheetah as their own. At least for now. A montage shows the cheetah getting used to his new surroundings as well as his new family. Same goes to Zan, Peter, and Kristen. They all do what they can to adapt to the new member of their farm. One job Zan has is to name the cheetah, and he eventually settles with Duma, the Swahili name for cheetah. A few scenes show Zan and his father bonding on the farm. They built a treehouse together, ride on a scooter, do all kinds of things. And of course, Duma's there watching on. One day, however, Peter falls sick and has to go to the hospital. And although he returns after a few weeks, seemingly all right, he's clearly still a little down and things aren't what they once were. Now one day, while hiding out in the treehouse, Zan's father climbs up to have a word with him about Duma. And he explains to Zan that Duma's a wild animal and they can't keep him on this farm forever. He continues to tell him that Duma wants to be free, that it is set for him to hunt, trap, chase, and live like other cheetahs. Well, Zan doesn't want Duma to go, but luckily, his father has a plan. He shows Zan a map highlighting where they found Duma. He explains that the next weekend they'll travel to this location, camp out the night, and leave Duma behind with his kind. It's a sad moment for Zan, but he knows it's the right thing to do. Unfortunately, before the two are able to do this, Peter passes away suddenly. Kristen then explains to him that with Peter gone, they can't live on the farm anymore, and they're going to have to sell it and move to the city. Zan rightly worries about Duma, and Kristen tells him that they'll send the cheetah to a reserve somewhere for him to live. But Zan doesn't want this. He wants Duma to be free in the wild. But Kristen explains that they have no choice. She has to worry about Zan first and Duma second. Zan attends his first day of school, and rightly, he's a little nervous. What's worse is that the school has bullies, and right from the get-go, they seem to have an eye out for him. And now back home, Duma's being kept inside a small apartment with Kristen's sister, and when Kristen leaves to pick up Zan from school, Duma manages to escape. Duma follows Kristen to the school. Now while Zan's in class, he's looking out the window and sees Duma watching. He goes to stand, only for the teacher to call him out and orders him to stay put. But then someone screams from outside. More screams, and the class erupts. Zan hurries from the room, knowing Duma's the cause. He chases Duma to a locker room only to be confronted by the bullies. Seeing as they are bullies, they proceed to pick on and beat up Zan. That is, until Duma steps in. One sight at that cheetah has the bullies wetting their pants and fleeing. Should be a moment of triumph, but as they exit the locker room, a SWAT team comes after Duma. Zan and Duma flee. Alone now, with no one to turn to, Zan realizes that Duma can't stay here any longer. But he also can't let his mother take the cheetah to that reserve. If Duma's gonna make it home, to live free with its kind, it'll be on Zan to get him there, and so he does. He leaves a note for his mother and then steals his father's motorbike and sidecar. With Duma in the sidecar, Zan begins their epic journey. But as expected, things soon go awry. They're cruising through the desert, miles away from road or civilization, when the engine on the bike suddenly gives out, stranding them literally in the middle of nowhere. Zan now has no choice but to push the bike along the desert, traveling until nighttime where they come across the wreckage of a plane. Now they set themselves up there, clearly having no idea what the next step is, or if they're even gonna survive this. And that night, as Zan sleeps, a wandering vagrant, Rip, appears from out of the desert and tries to steal the bike from right under Zan's nose. Well, he wakes up and confronts him. Luckily, Rip's not a crazy person. He's just a little lost and saw an opportunity to steal a bike and shorten his journey. But as Zan explains, the bike won't work unless it has gas, which obviously Rip doesn't have. But it's enough to break the ice and the two are soon bonding. Now Rip offers Zan some water but chastises him for giving some to Duma. He then explains that where he wants to go is 5 days' walk from their current location, but they might die of hunger long before then. He pitches the idea of eating Duma as a means to survive. But Zan has a better idea. There are a couple of parachutes near the wreckage, and using some serious ingenuity, Zan manages to strap them to the bike and create a sail. Wow. Now Zan, Duma, and Rip fly across the empty desert, wind in their sails, making up for all the time they lost sitting around. Even better is that now they won't have to eat Duma.
Say goodbye,
Meanwhile, Zan's mom is terrified for her son, and we see her print out missing posters. Using his knowledge of the desert, Rip manages to find fresh water by digging straight down into the earth. However, food is still a problem. But not to worry, with Duma there, surely they can catch something. They put the cheetah to the test, setting it on an ostrich. And soon it's running after the bird at full speed. Well, Duma fails in its hunt, but it does manage to come across a nest with some large ostrich eggs. It might not be a fresh ostrich, but it's still something. And that night, as they're making a fire and enjoying their eggs, Zan tells Rip of his plan to take Duma back where they found him as a cub. Rip, however, points out that this is very dangerous, mainly because of all the wild animals and their tendency to kill anyone they see. He offers to take Zan halfway, but Zan doesn't look like he trusts Rip one bit, but he also knows he has no other choice. So Zan, Rip, and Duma walk the empty desert through the boiling heat. At one point, they come across an ancient stone wall, where Rip finds a spearhead. He excitedly picks it up only to hear a helicopter flying in the sky. The two rush to hide from the chopper, not even realizing that it's Zan's mother searching for him. Although we get the sense that even if Zan knew that, he'd still hide out. Now the next day, they come across an abandoned diamond mine, and Rip insists on checking it out, just in case they find any left behind diamonds. And once he's gone, Zan sees his chance, and with Duma, the two make a break for it. But then they hear a crash from inside the tunnel. Rip's in danger, and with no choice, Zan runs in to help. As expected, the mine has caved in and buried Rip. Zan hurries over, seeing the man's waving hand and quickly unearthing his head so that he can breathe. Rip's beyond grateful, although he's still stuck and needs Zan to help dig him out. Again, Zan sees a chance and accuses Rip of taking him in the wrong direction, and despite Rip's protests, Zan leaves him there half buried and runs off with Duma. Their next challenge is a river that needs to be crossed. Zan manages to build a small raft, somehow, and he and Duma climb aboard as they start to cross the river. But then the current grabs them, and soon they're being led towards a large waterfall. And even worse, there's some gators in the water. As the two tumble into the water, the alligators are hunting them. Zan stabs with his spear, calling for Duma, as the alligators get closer and closer. Oh, it's a close one, looking like they're gonna be eaten. But Zan makes it to shore just in time. Close call. And that night, things became a little dangerous. They're truly in the wild now, and we see all types of native animals wandering the desertscape. As Zan makes his way through a dark jungle, Duma unknowingly becomes trapped in a cage. But before Zan can do anything about it, he's forced into a tree to avoid a wild boar that has his scent. And he watches the boar from above, only for a spider to have him lose his balance and crash to the ground below. Now the boar's on him, and it looks like Zan's done for. And then he passes out. When he regains consciousness, Rip is there, and so is Duma. Rip explains that he found Duma trapped in a cage and saved them both. He tells Zan that he considered selling them both for money. But then he goes on to explain that he was once this man. And he's done terrible things, including leaving his family behind. But that's not him anymore, and he seems determined to prove it. So the next day, Zan and Rip come across a small group of tourists camping in a bungalow. The tourists have food, and lots of it, and together, the two men conspire to steal it. They catch a large snake, and Zan wanders into the group and collapses, letting the snake loose among them. The tourists explode and flee for their lives, leaving the food unattended. Rip and Zan swoop in and they hurriedly steal it all before the tourists come back. They also manage to steal a canoe and do a little bonding as they begin what feels like the final leg of their journey. Rip gives Zan some precious stones, and Zan gives Rip some money. They laugh and joke, and finally things look to be going well for them. Another day passes, and the two men wander the desert some more. Duma's run ahead, and when they find him, he's eating a fresh animal carcass. Well, Zan tries to pull it away, but Duma growls at him, looking like he might attack. Rip pulls Zan back and explains that Duma's natural instincts are starting to take over. That this is what he wanted. Duma is, after all, a wild animal at his core. So later that day, Rip brings Zan to a cave he used to visit as a boy, and soon the conversation turns to Zan's father and death. Now the conversation's a metaphor for change and growth, and it seems to hit Zan in a different way than it might have a week earlier. He's growing and changing, as is Duma. They walk across an open plain where Rip grabs Zan and stops him in his tracks. A quick look over of the area, and suddenly Rip tells Zan to run, as there are tsetse flies. These are locust-like bugs that swarm upon them as Rip and Zan are within range. Rip grabs Zan and covers him in a blanket, but consequently gets enveloped and bitten by the little insects. And that night, the effects take place. Rip is sick, barely able to stand as rain pours down over him. Somehow they manage to get a fire started, but Rip is getting worse by the minute. With no choice, Zan leaves Rip by the fire and goes for help. But only after ordering Duma to stay behind, which, of course, he doesn't. As Zan hurries through the desert searching for help, a small pack of lions catch his scent. But then Duma appears and leads him away, saving Zan. Even better than during this daring rescue, Duma managed to get himself a girlfriend. But Zan's too preoccupied to realize this, and he finds a small village and explains in a panic that his friend is sick and needs help. Well, the villagers don't hesitate in giving aid. It's an odd-looking healing remedy to say the least, but it seems to do the trick. Rip wakes up the next morning, only to realize that the village is in fact his own, and his family is there. They reunite, and he apologizes for how he acted before he left. But there's no love lost, and the moment is a sweet one, well earned by Rip. His journey has finally come to an end. Now on the next day, Zan finally finds Duma and his new girlfriend. He's watching them play and run together and soon comes to realize that, although it hurts, this is exactly what he wanted for the cheetah. He has no choice but to leave the wild animal and return home, which he does. And he arrives home sometime later to find his mom back on the farm riding the mower. She sees him in the distance and jumps from the mower, running to her son, taking him in her arms. His journey was a long one he's sure not to forget. But now that he's home, Zan's able to begin the next part of his journey with those he loves, knowing at the same time that he will never forget Duma, and Duma will never forget him. That was a sweet one. Thanks for hanging out with us, guys. This was Duma, produced by Warner Brothers Pictures and released back in 2005. Directed by Carol Ballard, it starred Alexander Michaletos and Iman Walker. Plenty of tense moments in this one. Was there any point where you thought Duma might not make it home? Let us know with that hashtag #CinemaRecap in the comments. Till next time.